Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan and the Kaito Cooper, and welcome to the newest review for me for RWBY Vol.3. After Rooster Teeth shaved off some hair, tased poor Michael, and got majorly wild all for the kids last week in the name of charity, RWBY is back from a week's break. Back from a week off, did the break come at a bad time for the volume after another solid episode? Or was RWBY able to keep up the good run? Spoiler warning as per usual, so do watch with caution if needed, and let's kick off this review for episode 3, it's Brawl in the Family. The episode opens with Weiss and RWBY at the landing area to meet up with the newest Schnee on the block, Winter, voiced by Elizabeth Maxwell. Weiss is definitely excited to see Winter, even a little giddy like RWBY can be, though she is mindful of her upbringing and does break for more mature choice of words. But still, seeing Weiss this happy is rather pleasant to see. In her outburst as well, she tries selling to her sister the positives of Beacon and Vale, especially approving of the fact that unlike Atlas, the military and the school are separate here. So maybe she wasn't fond of such a system in Atlas. She definitely wasn't fond of RWBY's bumbling in front of her sister, giving the poor girl a bop. However, Winter's already well aware of Beacon, sounding not too fond of its bureaucracy as she calls it. She also lays out some rather strict opinions on Weiss's performance in the last fight. The way she graded her sister makes me think that she might have been the one to train Weiss, especially given their similarities in combat as we'll see later on. So far we can definitely see some familiar Schnee brand of dismissive coldness, if you pardon the pun there, from Winter. But fear not, she does seem to care for Weiss, after dropping her stiffness to ask how she's been, and having an interest in her time at Beacon. Not even a bonk on the small snowflake's head seems to hide the concern and warmness that Winter does have as a sister, not as a teacher or an upper class lady. So at least she's not a stuck-up noble type. Weiss introduced her sister to her friend RWBY, who Winter already has heard of, being aware that she's the leader of Weiss's team through some letters that she's received. Though she's a bit underwhelmed by what she sees. Poor RWBY's failed attempts to sound noble isn't really helping. Though that's interesting, Weiss is pretty much cutting off talking to her dad, but she's sending letters to Winter? How rocky is that relationship there between father and daughter? And what's Winter's stance on it? Anyway, after Winter thanks RWBY for taking an interest in Weiss, which gives more sign that Winter is hospitable even after their previous jab, and also gave something for the White Rose shippers, Winter's off to see her sister's room, with a nice callback to Volume 1 with the whole bunk beds tidbit. There's just one problem though. Stumbling his way forward and even wrecking a few Atlas bots is one very intoxicated Qrow, calling out the older Ice Queen and brushing off a more well-known younger one. I think it's safe to say these two have some history, and not the positive kind. At the very least, they are familiar with each other. We spy a black bird with red eyes surveying the scene, which, I don't know, doesn't that color scheme seem kinda familiar? Regardless, while being quite fun in his drunken state, Qrow is not happy hearing about Ironwood backstabbing Ozpin at the end of the last volume. Heck, he doesn't seem fond of any Atlas folk right now. In his eyes, the kingdom, or at least its military, acting like the world's protectors. He ends up grinding at Winter's gears until she's finally had enough, wanting to silence Qrow's outbursts in one hell of a rumble. Seriously, I'm gonna say this right now, this fight is quite cool. Winter and Qrow through this whole thing are very fast on their feet, and yet many of their strikes look very fierce and powerful. Despite being a bit bevved up, Qrow actually keeps up with Winter's pace, dodging her sharp thrusts, and despite his big sword, can move around just as well as she can. Winter on the other hand is very precise with her attacks. You can definitely tell that these two are expert, experienced fighters. The battle's drawn up quite the crowd too, catching RWBY's eye and asking what's up, which of course leads into her exclaiming, "That's my uncle." Naturally, she's in Qrow's corner, and Weiss is in Winter's. The fight has also caught the eye of Mercury, who on spotting Qrow, bolts off to warn Cinder. So it's clear already that the bad guys know this guy, and him being here isn't good news. After a stiff kick, note that Qrow has a bit of a spark in his eye, and almost wrecks Winter with a retaliating blow. I wonder if being tanks that can take damage and deal it right back tenfold might be a Branwen bloodline speciality via their semblance, because this is definitely feeling a lot like Yang, unless it's just, Qrow being Qrow. This fight goes off-road now, even up onto the roofs of the school, and we see that as per the catchphrase, Qrow's sword is also a gun, giving me some Final Fantasy VIII flashbacks in the process. Winter calls in some extra strength herself, lunging in with 2 blades now and sending the pair back down to the ground. And yet they're still going at it. Some more fast clashes leading into Qrow getting swarmed by glyph-summoned icebirds. Things come to a close though as Winter charges up and Qrow is about to call in the big guns. The blade of his sword starts to section off and curve. So yeah, he does indeed have a scythe function to his weapon. It's just not his base weapon style. Sadly though, we don't see him fully wielding it, as something catches his eye and he calls it back. He does give Winter one last push, just enough to anger her into attacking, halted only by Ironwood cutting her off. And hey look, Penny's here too, spying the wrecked robots. Ooh. Poor girl also gets to see Winter getting grilled by the general after Qrow makes it clear that he didn't strike first, she did. Qrow might be a little fueled by alcohol, but he was fully in control in this fight, and yet he was definitely holding back as well. The icing on the cake for him being Winter getting called out by her boss, who was also surprised to see Qrow. Ozpin and Glinda show up to shoo away the crowd and clean up, and Ozpin calls the adults in for a discussion. Ruby waves off Penny before turning into a rather hyper little puppy, happy to see her uncle and former teacher. Seriously, she's like a little puppy in this scene, happy to see their owner. And can I just say that the way Lindsay voiced her in this scene is probably one of my favourite RWBY moments so far in the entire show. She really sells Ruby's joy here, and that cute little hi that she made really made me smile. In fact, I really like a lot of this whole scene here, where we see the relationship these two have. Even if Qrow is a little rough around the edges, you can definitely tell that he cares about his niece, and has a good connection with her. He's sort of like the cool, fun uncle that's almost like a kid himself. Definitely elements that RWBY has inherited. Qrow's not won any good points in Weiss's book though, so it'll be interesting to see what this altercation does in terms of her relationship with RWBY and Yang, having their family members at each other's necks. But it's time for some serious talk inside Ozpin's office, and Qrow is still pushing some Atlas buttons. No one seems happy with that fight outside. Ironwood and Winter's pissed at Qrow, Glinda's pissed at Qrow and Winter, and Qrow is just drinking away. Apparently this is a common thing for him, so at least we know that he isn't a recent drunk. Anyway, looks like Qrow's appearance is a surprise to everyone else. Qrow's been apparently out of contact for a while, so much so that he wasn't aware that the group already knows that enemy is in Beacon, and he's not fond of this news as well since it wasn't sent his way, while he had to deal with apparently a lot on the outside in the meantime. Though the others believed he was caught spying and thus the lack of contact. Winter being around right now isn't helping his attitude as well, leading to Ironwood's second in command getting the call to leave. So she's a part of the group and yet not privy to the finer details. Those finer details being that the one who snuck into Beacon isn't just the enemy, but they're the person behind Autumn's condition. So here I am asking the obvious question now, who or what in the holy high hell is Autumn? The others seem to know, but we don't even know if Autumn is a person. The fact that Qrow is the first person to name drop them makes me think that Autumn is tied to him. Perhaps it's his wife or a friend and colleague. It's also one of the newest uses of a seasonal name in the show, after Summer Rose and Winter Schnee. Cinder too if you use her autumnal last name, Fall. Seems like those people with seasons tied to their name are people of some importance, which only makes me curious who will eventually be named Spring. Also in this bit, going by Qrow's word, the other two headmasters of the schools are a part of this group as well, just they're not here. Qrow highlights the importance of the headmasters and guys like him, making sure that people are safe from the dangers they don't even know about, dangers that they must keep in the dark, thus why they meet like this behind closed doors and rely on scouts in the shadows, which after dropping the first curse word in the show, leads into Qrow giving Ironwood some major heat over his past actions, calling in his massive fleet, creating brand new robotic soldiers and mechs, and holding presentations in front of the populace, all of these steps ignoring that discreet mindset that they've had to use so far, making it very clear to the world that there's some nasty stuff being brewed outside. Can't say that I blame Qrow for being pissed here, especially since Ironwood was invited into this group by Ozpin and now is challenging his actions and that discreet mindset. Here he is putting their covert plans at risk in his belief that the people need a visible symbol of their defense and a visible showcase of their strength to those who wish to challenge them. Admittedly, I also can't find fault in Ironwood too much. He does seem to have the best intentions at heart, but it's risky moves, and Qrow exclaims that he knows the enemy, who he notes is a she, so he knows that much, isn't gonna be afraid of Ironwood's army with whatever he's seen that she's up to. Ozpin pipes in as well to highlight the other issue, the Grimm, pointing out the obvious that if the people can't see this is the size of their defenses, then they'll be thinking, what's the size of the enemy's offensive? Spawning concern and fear in their minds, negative emotion which the Grimm could feed on, and beckons them to the source, causing their own troubles. It doesn't seem like Ironwood's really thought out the after effects of some of his moves. He also doesn't take notice of a familiar symbol popping up on his scroll laying on Ozpin's desk. Still, it's time for them to make a new plan. To find a Guardian. A smaller yet still strong symbol of their aims to protect the people. A symbol of hope, not conflict. Perhaps someone who may shine in the tournament. We cut now to Cinder's room where Merc's already given her the update on Qrow being around. But Cinder does point out that they are still okay with their current masquerade as students, since nothing points to them being the enemy, so they can keep up with their plans. Especially with the last of the heavy lifting done thanks to their smart little friend. Again, I'm asking more questions. What is being brought in, and who is that smart little friend? I wanna guess that it might be some sort of new line of mechs, since we know her faction did grab some from Ironwood's army, and possibly worked on by this other person. Unless that's just someone who helped out with the transport, that might even be Adam, or possibly Torchwick if they busted him out already. So Cinder's next move is emotion, and she even gains a new toy. Direct control to Ironwood's scroll, after the virus that she dropped into the CCT system got in through Ozpin's CCT connected desk. You can see that the general's face is in one corner, as well as a stylized W in the other. Cinder having control of the data used by the guy in charge of the tournament security can't be good news for anyone. Even more clear as Cinder starts to manually decide the brackets for the doubles round. It goes by fast, but you can see that Sun and Neptune are the doubles pair for Team Sun, and the pair of Russell and Sky are the boys repping Team Cardinal. I'm actually surprised that they're in the tournament, and Cardin didn't choose to go through himself, and it's a shame that Sage and Scarlet won't be either of the members representing Team Sun. Maybe Sage's true time to shine will be in some other battle down the road. The other interesting note is that we see Penny's team got through the first round as well, and she will be representing the pair for her team in the doubles round, alongside this girl with a beret and a star on her forehead. I'm taking a gamble here. I think she may be someone from the group who worked on Penny, perhaps her father's assistant. Cinder's decided on the opponents for her team though, that being Coco Adele and Yatsuhashi Daichi of Team Coffee. So no Velvet or Fox as well, sadly. Though I am looking forward to seeing how Qrow and Yatsuhashi handle themselves, and it could possibly be where we hear the big guy speak for the first time. And I'm also kind of worried for them. This won't be an easy fight. Also, with Cinder fixing the fights like this, it makes it seem that she does intend on going as far as possible in this tournament, maybe even looking to win the whole thing. I wonder why though. What would her team gain from being the champions? If she wanted to just say fight the people on her list, like Pyrrha, why not just pair up her team against Team Juniper? What part does success in the tournament play into her plans? The next day confirms this fight to the crowd, and we see our familiar teams all pumped for the doubles round, including some familiar faces in the back, as the episode ends with Cinder watching on. The game's definitely getting interesting now, as more of a plan moves into motion, and more seems to be on the line than just glory. Jumping right into the positives and negatives segment of my reviews, I'm actually going to skip the negative section this time, because I don't have any noteworthy negatives that warrants any mention. I'm not saying this episode was flawless, but most of it was very positive for me, and nothing really warrants the negative highlights section. So yeah, straight on to the positives, starting with praising the introduction to Winter and the true showcase for Qrow. Qrow is expressive and full of wisecracks, making him instantly charming to me. But he's also a very capable fighter and is serious about his job and the danger ahead. He's also very upfront as well. He actually reminds me of another role of Vic Mignogna's, Phantom Thief Dark Mousy from DNA Angel. Very cunning and charismatic, bit of a cocky bastard, and often fond of a wisecrack, but when serious, he brings it to the table, showing the intellect and skill fitting a man of his age and his experience. On Winter, as I said, it's good that they didn't make her the stuck-up noble, second-in-command with a stick-up backside type. While she is firm, especially with Weiss and Qrow, and has the attitude fitting her job and acting very serious when it comes to it, she's still able to come down from it and show a friendlier side, which made for some charming banter with Weiss and RWBY in that opening scene, and showed a mature presence in her discussions later on, and in combat seeing all of her moveset, or at least what she's capable of. The eldest Ice Queen and the dusty old Qrow gave one hell of a fight, really showcasing the level of skill a fighter their age can be in this world. It's a good contrast to a lot of the fights we've seen so far, because of course many of the characters are still students learning their craft. I will admit that the speed of it at times can be a bit too much for some, but again, it's two fighters who, unlike most of our cast, are very trained, hardened fighters. And it makes sense that their fight is something different, and it was shaped perfectly as much too, to my approval. Not to say that all the positives came from these two, as RWBY had plenty to offer as well, being possibly the most adorable she's ever been. Her interactions with Winter, and especially with Qrow, were some of the most charming bits of the entire show so far, and I tip my hat to Lindsay for that performance. And even in such a small moment in terms of the episode as a whole, the RWBY crew sculpted the scene between RWBY and Qrow wonderfully to show off their bond as niece and uncle beautifully in such a short scene. I gotta praise the scene as well in Ozpin's room, as it gave plenty of insight into this group as a whole, and some of their actions and reasoning, especially involving Ironwood. The inclusion of Qrow has made for quite the fun new dynamic for them all to work off of. Plus, he and Ozpin gave the right kind of weight to the negatives of some of the moves that Ironwood's made. The fact this episode also gave a ton of new questions for us fans to speculate over, especially the identity of this Autumn, definitely adds to the appeal of this episode moving on. Voice acting praise of the episode is a close one between the three that I've mentioned already, Vic, Elizabeth, and Lindsay. But since they did so well already, feeling right at home as their respective characters, and working with the various emotions very well, I'm gonna give it to the pair of Vic Mignogna and Elizabeth Maxwell. So that's this review done, and my thoughts on episode 3. So far, it's my personal favourite of the volume. It's great that we finally got more of the overarching plot starting to pair up with the other plot elements in this arc. And be it the brilliant debut of Winter, her clash with Qrow, or the interesting discussions that's taken place, there was plenty to enjoy. And I definitely feel that the volume came back strong after the week off. But that's just my opinion. Do you feel the same? What's your feelings on Winter and Qrow? Do you like a bit of Drunkle Qrow? And who do you think Autumn is? Or what even? And also, what are you hoping to see in the next episode? Let me know in the comments below. Check me out on Twitter for more RWBY stuff or video updates and other randomness from me. And until next time, have a good day or good night, and peace